Well, while we're waiting, waiting for everyone to get seated, this is the Tiger Radio Hour, but I want to point out what I'm wearing. This jacket is about 47 years old. I got it, I think, when I was a sophomore at Princeton. I don't really wear it anymore, but I got a lot of use here and in med school. One of my med school friends said, "What is your name, Princeton?" And then this t-shirt, which I haven't worn in many years, I was even older. I got this, remember what they call now admit day was April hosting day. I don't know, did anyone go to April hosting day? A few I did. And I was so excited about Princeton. I went to the used store and I bought the shirt. So this shirt I bought in April of 1975. The famous buckshot. Alright, so now I gotta get my reading glasses. Alright, so here we are. Welcome 79ers and our guests. I'm Lonnie Behar, and this is Mimi Chan. We're your hosts for our first ever 79 Tiger Radio Hour, a storytelling event. Here we are in Holder Courtyard. It's a bit off the beaten path for reunions. We're kind of like the stepchildren. The 45th is kind of like the stepchildren. But for most of us in the class, except for those of you who lived at the inn, now known as Forbes, and Wilson College, now known as a big hole in the ground, Commons was the center of our social life during our first 2 years here. And here we are in Sub Eagle, right, the Veggie Hall. If we weren't having food fights, we sat with our friends at long wooden tables, eating some so-so quality meals, relating stories about how our day went, what we learned in class, what activities we were engaged in, what parties we were going to, or perhaps even gossiping a bit about our fellow students. Sharing stories about our lives has been with us since prehistoric people sat around the fire. But this line I wrote, and I'm totally wrong. But this evening's gathering of 79ers in a beautiful air-conditioned room, is inspired by the podcast, The Moth Radio Hour. How many people listen to The Moth? We love The Moth. It's a chance for your classmates to share a bit of their lives with you, to tell stories that will entertain and perhaps inspire you as well. Now,
and I have a cheat sheet too. We asked for storytellers, so apparently a group of 7 intrepid people stepped up in true 79 family form. And our brave storytellers today, Diane Edelman and Amy Grin. Will Huber, our fearless class leader. Lauren Taslitz, Gary King, and Phil Witt. I haven't seen Gary all day. You hid from us. So, please stand up. Let's give them a big cheer. 79ers. And when everyone is done, you can give them an even bigger cheer. So, we'll be putting their names in a hat to choose the order of speakers of using the totally modern method of paper and a hat. As part of the introductions of our participants, be asked one question of each regarding the gourmet eating establishments of our youth. So they were asked when they were on campus and you and your friends had a hankering for food, you were not supplied by dining services, or you had the munchies at 3 a.m. for unknown reasons, where would you head to? Some of the choices included Hoagie Haven, PJ's, the Athenian, Wawa, or maybe the call of the Bagel Man. Bagel Man! Okay, everybody will have their answer when we introduce them. Okay, Lonnie. Truly a real fact. Okay. Amy Grimm.
Already a winner.
Amy's story is entitled Do Gargoyles Fear Heights? Amy competes in dog sports, including agility, rally, and lure coursing. Apparently, she has a pup dog who runs 19 miles per hour. Sophomore year at the end of semester, Amy stole her Skinner box pigeon from Psych 101 to save him from that terrible fate. She thinks the statute of limitations has run out, so it's safe to share that part. Snack runs while at Princeton. PJs for chocolate chip pancakes. Alchemist and barrister for the fruit and cheese board. Various faculty lounges for the stray oranges when wandering during late night studies. Okay, this is going to be new here with the mic. So sophomore year, I joined the mime company. In high school, I did not make it into the theater club. The drama teacher said my eyes were too small and too deep set, and people in the back wouldn't be able to see my expression. The mime company, however, was perfect for me. They were creative, theatrical, no lines to remember, no singing, no dancing, and most importantly, no speaking in front of an audience, since talking to large groups makes me really nervous. The mimes were a great group. We would meet and brainstorm ideas for our shows at Theater on Team. Skits that ranged from poignant to silly, from funny to thought-provoking. I actually fell off the stage once at Theater on Team. There was another show running that week, and it had the true upstage, downstage slope. So when the lights went down on our skits, we had to go to the wings and jump off of that slope and get out of the dodge there. And I had just jumped so far, I went right off the stage into the audience. And we also used to do an audience participation piece at the end of each one of those shows, where we would go out and just, go out under cover of darkness and then sit in the laps of the people in the audience, which was just so surprising to them. And one of them was called Sing Along with Mime, and they had a flashlight going along on the stage, and we were just gesturing and trying to get the crowd to do the gesturing because that was the singing. There was another one where the mimes were coming down the aisles, being flight attendants, and miming all of the directions, and then I think the theater crashed, but those were so much fun. Besides the theater shows, we did do some street mime on a few occasions, mostly for publicity. In March of sophomore year, someone had the bright idea that we could climb up onto a ledge over an archway in East Pine Courtyard to pose as gargoyles for a photo op. The idea was to use that for a poster advertising one of our shows. We wore our usual black leotards, ballet slippers, clown white makeup with baby powder and black eyeliner. So I climbed up the ladder and climbed and climbed and climbed, like 30 feet in the air, and stepped out on the ledge. Kind
kind of. Stepped out on the ledge, made it there, turned around, looked down, and sat down. Because it turns out I'm afraid of heights too. So the mimes are doing, gargoyle poses for the camera while it clicks away. My terrified face fits just right in. We found out later that the photos did not come out due to some technical failure. However, I have a few because a friend of mine with my cheap little camera took some pictures, so there's a few actually proving that we did this. So when it came time to climb back down the ladder, I froze. There was no way I could make myself do it. So I'm there, just freezing, and people are having to climb over me to get back down the ladder, and everybody's really annoyed. And I'm desperate. And I notice right behind us, there's a tiny leaded glass window with a hinged window opening right onto the desk of a French professor. Just when you thought you would never actually use the phrase, ouvrir la fenêtre, s'il vous plaît. However, I was still a mime, and my French was sketchy, but I managed to communicate my dilemma, and he graciously agreed. Did I mention the window was tiny? But fear is a great motivator. I managed to squeeze through the opening, wriggle across his desktop, mime my thanks to him, and scamper down the stairs. I always wondered how he described his workday to his spouse that night. We actually have an additional volunteer. It is Peter Allen, and I'm sorry, Peter. Apparently, he emailed me a long time ago, and I forgot to put him on the list. That's my fault. So this will be Peter. So we'll put that slip in the.
We don't have an intro for you. Our next speaker, yes, it's Diane Edelman. Diane's story is entitled The Road Not Taken. Diane, a law professor, is married to classmate and physician John Edelman. She reveals, fun fact, when I was in law school, I was voted the best oralist in a competition. A moot competition, that is. Diane's eatery of choice, she thinks, was Hoagie Haven, but states, I'm too old to remember.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you all for being here. Please note the orange folder. Black print. The road not taken. Just what does that mean? Route 206? The New Jersey Turnpike? The New York Thruway? Not for me. You see, before I joined you all at Princeton back in 1975, I had been a pre-med for as long as I can remember. My parents were both doctors. They loved their work. They loved helping others. I wanted to do the same. In high school, I had no fear. I took biology, chemistry, and advanced chemistry and orgo. In high school, what a nerd. And I aced all of them. I figured, though, that I would explore my other interests, namely in the Middle East, and major in Near Eastern Studies when I got here, and still be pre-med. So those are my goals, NES and pre-med. And then I became a member of this great class of 79. I started out taking advanced general chemistry during my freshman year, and orgo and biology during my sophomore year, and dug into some pretty cool courses in Near Eastern Studies, confident that I was on the right track. But what happened? I flunked orgo. Yep, aced it in high school, flunked it at Princeton. But this, you might be thinking about this already, This is not the tale of a Princeton professor who was later to be determined to have failed too many students in Orgo. No, this is my story, not his. Well, my other grades faded into history. Especially this week, when I ordered and got a fresh copy in a matter of minutes of my transcript. And yes, it is the F in Orgo that is certain. Now, I had blocked completely out of my memory until a day or two ago when I got this. By the way, you can order it for free and get one in less than a half an hour. Should you can do that now. In any event, I thought it was just Orgo, but I had a C+ in advanced chemistry and a C- in biology. I'm just glad to see that I had some version of A's or B's in the other courses. But, you know, now that I think about it, that's what wasn't happening for me. So what happened next? My parents, thankfully, were sympathetic. They, of course, asked whether I wanted to transfer somewhere else and go for pre-med again. But I chose not to, and they supported me. I loved Near Eastern Studies and all the things international and stuck with that. But what was I going to do when I got out of here? I'd been pre-med forever. Well, I took a year off, worked as a paralegal, and then did what many paralegals do, applied to law school. And I actually did something with a sense of humor. I wrote a law school application essay about, quote, a book that changed my life, Morrison and Boyd's Organic Chemistry. I so wish I could figure out what college I wrote it for and get a copy of that essay. This is, of course, before, photocopying and computers and all that stuff. Anyhow, I pursued my passion for things international in law school, clerked for a judge, worked for a couple of law firms, and then dove into academia. I taught at Villanova Law outside of Philly for 30 years, and then returned to my alma mater, Brooklyn Law School, to direct. Thank you, Gary, for the Brooklyn plug. To direct its international programs just last year. So where's the story going, if you're wondering? Did you already hear the path I'm taking? Almost. Let's move to last August, when Brooklyn Law was holding orientation for its new class of JD students and law master's students. I was asked last minute, and we're talking very shortly after I was hired, to join a round table of professors who would hold a casual chat with a couple hundred students who were just about to begin their legal studies. They filled a large classroom. They looked pretty nervous. And you can imagine how I felt, because teaching is a lot, for those of you who teach, it's a lot like acting. You're performing in front of the class, and you might be nervous also. In any event, one by one, my few colleagues told tales about what it had been like for them to become lawyers. Because I was asked to speak at the last minute, I hadn't even been sure what I would talk about until that moment. And so I told my story, the one I just shared with you. I told all of them. They're calling I told all 200 or more of these total strangers how I'd been pre-med until I failed organic chemistry. A lot of people in here. And now, 30 years later, I have built a successful career in legal academia and would be teaching some of them. Fortunately, when I told the story, I didn't faint from embarrassment. Fast forward to later that afternoon. I received an email that said, "Dear Professor Edelman, I hope this email finds you well." The student went on to tell me her name and that she was the first-year student. Then she went on. "First, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us incoming law students. Then, I wanted to say how much your path to law school resonated with me. Much like you, I come from a family of doctors. I too thought I would be a doctor and chose the pre-med route, till I also failed organic chemistry. international things. Even more so, one of the first things I did was take a few courses about the Middle East, a region I long wanted to learn more about. After that, I did a deeper dive into international relations with a master's degree, and that put me toward the law school path. Along those lines, I'm hoping to pursue international law in the future. All that to say, when I heard your story, it made me laugh and go, yes, me too. I did that too. I'm glad to see that a law professor and BLS alum has a similar story. As all the mix of emotions run their course as I begin this new adventure, I'm comforted in knowing I'm not the only one with this background. Well, that was the end of her letter. Not only did this student write to me, but on her own, she stopped by to meet me the next day. And she just got through her first year of law school just fine. So this goes to show that even if you feel mixed or maybe okay about the road not taken, the story of why you took a different road may bring joy to you and others as time moves on. This time, I had joy all along the way as I studied what I wanted to. I didn't flunk anything else. But it's nothing like the joy I felt 45 years after graduation when I got this visit and this meeting and this email from the student. So thanks for listening to this. And think, even if you're not up here speaking today, think of your own stories and share them with others. Thanks.
Give it up for Diane. My turn. Ooh, Simone Schloss. Simone's story is entitled How I Failed My Way to Success. Simone mysteriously asked for a short intro because of story spoilers. Simone comes from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, attended the Hunter College campus schools. Princeton was Simone's first co-ed experience since primary school. In response to our question, she replied, nothing could ever compare with the meals my chef Alan Appner served at Cloister Inn.
In 1975, I was so excited when I applied to Princeton. I was so looking forward to being here, but I didn't get in. I was only waitlisted that year. I arrived at Princeton sophomore year after spending a year commuting by bicycle to Barnard College. And after I arrived at Princeton, everything flowed from there. In 1976, I was so excited to meet my roommates at Brown Hall. They didn't want me. They had very specific reasons why it would be inconvenient for me to be their roommate. It wasn't personal. In fact, I trooped right back to the housing office before I even got my things out of the bed. I don't think they're here tonight. I was reassigned quickly to Holder Hall, where I met wonderful people who became lifelong friends. Later that year, my first year at Princeton, I was so excited to join an a cappella singing group, but they didn't want me. The Tiger Lilies said, go to Triangle. But I was too shy to go to Triangle, and so I didn't sing in college. Later that year, I was so excited to apply to a major at the Woodrow Wilson School, now called SPIA, but I became aware of that application process too late. So I didn't major in the Woodrow Wilson School. And I learned about eating clubs, but it was too late for Springside Avenue at the beginning of junior year and wandered into Cloisterman, and there was room for me, and I signed up. And everything in my upper class years flowed from that. At Cloister, I became undergraduate treasurer, a thread running through my life, and again, I made lifelong friends. As a senior, I was an economics major in the end. My father was so happy when I was offered admission to business school, right? At the end of high school, at the end of my senior year at Princeton. I had other ideas. A great dispute ensued, and in fact, you would think that I had proposed backpacking in the Himalayas, when all I wanted to do was work for the Central Bank of the United States. I won the battle, but not the war. And after a year in D.C., the one who had his way was my father, who pressured me to rush for the best job I ever had to attend business school. And I have to stop here and say that when I wrote these notes, there was an additional word preceding the word father. It was elderly. And then I realized that he was the same age then that we are now. But to be elderly, he was. My elderly father, a 1940s political refugee from Eastern Europe, wanted me to have an easier life than he had had. And he wanted me to be set. And that's the thinking behind the whole business school idea. So at Wharton, where I got my MBA, I was a public policy fellow. Yes, an oxymoron. And apart from that, the best thing about Wharton was being in the Follies, which is like Triangle except for business school students. After Wharton, I had a tough time finding my place in the world of work because, you see, I wanted public policy and now I was a business school graduate. And I ended up landing a job at the Treasurer's Office of General Motors in New York City. And I didn't like this job, and I didn't like that it was the fruits of my labor at business school, which I hadn't liked. And for context, I hadn't been all that thrilled about being an econ major anyway, even though I won a prize for my thesis. So the Treasurer's Office in New York of General Motors was one of the best jobs somebody could get. And I was miserable. Because the other financial analysts, the guys, I mean, had spouses supporting their long hours of FaceTime with a lowercase f, and jockeying for a spot in the pyramid of power. Whereas, and this was the kicker, I was told I was too aggressive for a woman by my manager, Princeton 68, by the way. And I don't think he's here tonight. I eventually did a career search to get back to public policy. And soon afterwards, I documented this search in a letter to the author of What Color is Your Parachute?, which is still in publication today. And I was so happy when the author, Richard Nelson Bowles, wrote back suggesting we meet over lunch to discuss my search. But he never took me to lunch. Panicked at the thought, I never took him on one. And I spent the next 4 years in New York City doing public policy work that I loved. I had my first child. I took a leave of several months, and I was so happy when my manager suggested I return to work part-time, but it never materialized. Ambivalent, I never took her up on it. When the time came to choose, it felt easier to give up one dream and to fulfill another. So, I was in my 30s, raising 3 daughters in New York City, when a funny thing happened. Singing to my children helped me find my own voice. In 1998, when we moved to the suburbs, I became a singer in quick succession. I became a cabaret performer. I joined a choral group whose members included a tiger lily. Princeton 75. And I don't think she's here tonight. And finally, 25 voice a cappella pop jazz quintet. Later, a personality test at Princeton in career services revealed, who knew, an aptitude for librarianship. 50 years old. I returned to graduate school. I became an academic librarian. The point is that I did what I wanted. Even when it cost me or pushed me off my path, I found my way back to the path. At each step along the way, I rebranded myself as a Princetonian, as a mother, as a cabaret singer, as a librarian. And somehow, I seized those moments when the second chances came around. And all of these experiences, the economics degree, the MBA, the MLIS, which is the degree in library science, and even the vocal performance were what got me my current job as a business librarian at New York Public Library. My dream job. The truth is that in the end, I fulfilled all of my dreams. And this story of how I failed my way to success is not over. Not for me and not for any of us. Also, I became divorced. I later remarried. Princeton 78, by the way. I know he's here tonight. And I recorded a short version of my personal love story in Paw online, which you can hear if you Google my name and Paw. The moral of the story is that there is a long and winding road, which wasn't always clear, but eventually I got everything I wanted. Thank you.
This is great. Thanks for joining. All right, our next speaker is Bill Huber. Phil's story is entitled, What? Go Back to Syracuse? Phil, of course, is our class president, has worked as a fundraiser for nonprofits, and he and his wife have owned the quintessential New England Country Inn for many years. His choice of food outlets was not on the original list. The pizza place Conti's, which is way down Witherspoon Street. I wasn't familiar with it. He reports that one drunken night he was dispatched to return with a pizza, only to hold it perpendicular to the ground as he hurriedly returned with a pie. It was still edible. But Phil also notes that he worked as one of the bagel men.
By the way, Dee and I are shooting what are called cutaways because we're going to make this event into a movie. So we're going to slice in reactions. So if I say anything stupid or funny, maybe we'll capture it. Yeah. So my voice carries pretty good, so I don't even think I need to use a microphone unless there's anyone having a hard time. Yeah. So let's see. Have any of you had or can remember a 1-minute conversation that completely changed your life? Well, I can. And when I was in 8th grade, my best friend down the street, Richard, he told me that he was going to go away to school. And I was like, what did he do wrong? And so he went away in 9th grade. When he came home for Thanksgiving, he's telling me about boarding school. My eyes got big. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm going. This sounds really fantastic. Had a big fight with my parents about this, but was able to get in and I went. And let's just say in 10th grade, I was not mature enough or psychologically screwed up from 10th grade. I worked my job, came back to school, totally motivated, right? And that one, without that 1 minute conversation, what would not have happened? The New England Conservatory All State Orchestra, Judy, my wife, who sat next to me, that wouldn't have happened. How about the trip to the Soviet Union that spring? That wouldn't have happened. Princeton? No way. That wouldn't have happened. And then what about what would not have happened, at Princeton, right? Well, all the great things, all these unbelievable, friendships that we've made. It reminds me of this. I have a freshman friend here who committed to Princeton on her last day to commit. She told me that the curveball had been thrown at her. And when she committed, she wrote me, and the curveball is MIT. Well, I tell you what, MIT's great, but it's not this. So at any rate, the other things in my life that would not have occurred had Mr. Cox had not scared the shit out of me. Was, business school, starting our business in New Hampshire, being married to Judy for all these years. We got married right out of school, so, this is our 45th reunion, it's our 45th anniversary. So at any rate, I have met several times with Mr. Cox, and we're still in touch, and whenever I see him, which is once every a couple of years, I basically thank him for that 1 minute conversation. Oh, right, and I wouldn't be here, you wouldn't have me as your president, and all the other great things that happen.
Lauren Taslin. Her story is entitled Too Pitchy to Pitch. Lauren is a former Harvard-trained lawyer turned musical theater lyricist librettist. She made a midlife left-hand turn, earned an MFA in musical theater writing from NYU Tisch. Her musical Empty Nesterhood was performed at our 35th reunion. Her shows have also graced many other venues in New York, Chicago, and most recently, Lauren completed the first draft of a new musical called The Girl Who Cried Different. In response to our question, Lauren said, I lived at the Princeton in freshman year. I was Wawa every day. Entenmann's baked goods were a staple. The freshman 15, let's just say I overachieved. I'm with you there, Lauren.
I'm waiting for my sound person. Okay, well, when you get to the end, tell Zach if you can't hear something or other. Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So, growing up, my chore was the ironing. Banished to the basement for hours on end, I would pass the time singing along to Broadway cast albums. My brother and sister, Philistines both, did not appreciate that Shirley Jones was serenading them, and I could hear them upstairs screaming, Mom, Dad, make her stop. Obviously, that did not make me stop. What did make me stop was, I'm not sure how old I was, but I was riding in the backseat of my parents' car and singing, and my mother leaned over to my father and, assuming I wouldn't be able to hear her, whispered, I think she's tone deaf. Well, so that was it for me. I was devastated and vowed that I would never again sing if anybody could hear me. So, I continued to play my show tunes on the piano, and I brought my music to Princeton, and I brought my music to law school, and later when I had space, I always had a piano, continued to add to my show tunes library, but if anybody was around, I didn't sing. This was not a problem until 1999, when I started writing comedic musical sketches for my children's middle school fundraiser, and then moved on to write raunchy words and I present at a writer's meeting, except because I am too pitchy to pitch, I always had someone present for me. I did this for probably almost 15 years. I probably wrote literally 300 to 400 songs over this period of time, and every single time I had someone sing for me. And then in 2015, like all rational people in their mid-50s, I decided to go to musical theater grad school, where I'm required to write 2 or 3 songs a week. And again, I'm having somebody present for me, one of my classmates. Second semester, my first year, I wrote a song called Nantucket Honeymoon that was so autobiographical that I couldn't envision asking one of my 23-year-old classmates to sing the song. And I've neglected to mention that I started taking voice lessons about 3 or 4 years before I went to grad school, and I continued to take them in New York, and I'm not tone deaf. So when I decided I had to sing the song, I told myself it was going to be fine. In fact, I was going to get up there and start to sing, and my classmates, who unlike my brother and sister were not Philistines, would leap to their feet, astonished to discover that Shirley Jones had been with them like all year long. So the day comes, my turn comes, I stand up, I start to sing, and I watch as the astonishment in their faces quickly turns to horror. Before I finished, no one was looking at me, and when class ended, they flew out the door, and we never spoke of it again. Needless to say, I did not sing at school again. And about, a year later, I finished, and I thought, phew, at least this isn't hanging over my head anymore. And then a month later, an actor asked me to sing something for him. And when I said, I don't sing, he said, you're gonna have to get over it. People aren't gonna expect you to present your work. So, this fear of having to sing in front of people has been hanging over my head until this very day, this very night, this very room, this very moment. And you might know where this is going. I have another minute. Wait. So, choosing to pursue musical theater writing is not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of rejection. It's a lot of ghosting. I wake up a lot of days wondering what the hell I'm doing. And on those days, I will occasionally look at my horoscope seeking encouragement. And I found that half the time, my horoscope seemed to say, take a hard look at your life and banish that which no longer serves you. Well, for the past few years, some of my most important relationships had been particularly challenging, and I would read those words and think, am I supposed to banish Danny, my primary collaborator, whom I love? Am I supposed to banish William Finn, my friend and mentor, whom I love? And I couldn't imagine doing that. Anyway, a few months ago, another one of those moods. Why do I persist in hitting my head against the wall? I'm not interesting. I'm not talented. I'm not an artist. I'm not even that nice a person. I don't deserve success. And incidentally, you spend your life writing songs and you won't sing. So look at my horoscope. There it is again. Banish that which no longer serves you. And it dawns on me that these voices in my head are not serving me. And I've spent the last few months working on banishing them. So tonight, I am going to take aim at that voice my mother inadvertently planted in my head over 50 years ago. And for the first, and maybe last, but the first time since that humiliation in a grad school, I'm going to sing a snippet of a song from the show I'm working on now called The Girl Who Cried Different. The song was written by my collaborators, Mariella Elm and her dad, Tommy Barbarella. And it's called, and we'll see how this works. It's called, I Am Not Afraid Anymore.
Our next speaker is the one and only Gary King. Gary's story is entitled Simply Hair. Gary needs little introduction. A native and still resident of that great borough of Brooklyn. It's my home borough too. Gary is our former class president, and among the many, many Princeton caps he wears, he is the voice of the P-Raid and a member and former chair of the Princetoniana Committee. He worked at IBM for many years and is very active in his church. Fun fact, he has attended every reunion since 1978. Gary reports that Plus and Mike Cullen and his Jeep, when they had the munchies, they traveled to the Princetonian Diner on Route 1 or Burger King in North Trenton.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'll go to Lonnie and say that we were not supposed to have any notes, but he wrote about a week ago and said, "How's your story coming?" And I said, "Okay." Just wrote up the whole thing. This is going to be my story. And Lonnie's response was, rather brief vignette. Feel free to expand upon it." It's a little bit embarrassing for somebody who grew up listening to Gene Shepard on the radio every night from 10:15 to 11. Which is also sort of how I got to be the narrator of the P-Raid, because Greg Lang also used to listen to Gene Shepard. And if anybody was WPRB, Gene Shepard used to come here every year at reunion, so it was like a live stream to listen to him. So I'll expand upon it by saying when Lonnie offered this opportunity, I jumped at it, and the first thing I said was, I'll just tell one of the stories that I wrote in Facebook group from, it was 40 years ago today, and Lonnie said, "No, you need to do something that's a little bit more original." Right. You may see those stories again. I mean, it was 50 years ago today. Then I thought, okay, there is a classic story that very few people know, that my freshman roommate, John Edelman, thought that he would be living with a Hasidic Jew. Thank you phone call in the middle of August to find out whether you're bringing a record player or a stereo down. It's like, stereo? I don't have a stereo, I have a record player. Never mind. Anyway, that's another story. I was doing one of my daily walks, and on the daily walk, I was listening to classical gas, and I decided, no, I'm going to change my story to something that's really personal, but something that I think we all can identify with, or at least I can identify with it. Unfortunately, this year, we lost two classmates. We lost Mark Furley early in the year and Bruce Bond at the end of the year. I met Bruce through his neighbors, Prentice Hall and Jeff Shallett, whom I met through Diane Penny's, because Jeff and Diane went to the same high school. And we were inmates, and so was Mark Furley. He was an inmate, but I didn't meet Mark until we got to beginning swimming, because Mark and I were both athletically inept. And so we were in swimming together, and there was one thing I sort of noticed about Mark, and when Carl Britton and Lester Ordway and I were sort of discussing Mark's passing, and thinking about what kind of memorial we were going to give to him, the one thing that came out was Mark was very hirsute. Mark had a 5 o'clock shadow at noon. That was one reason that Carl said that he grew a beard, and that Mark grew a beard, and that's why he grew a beard as well. And I was a little bit envious of that, because even today, I cannot grow a goatee because there is actually no hair between the mustache and the bottom of my chin. In fact, I didn't start shaving daily until I was 30. I didn't start shaving every other day until about 1987. And senior year, I remember very distinctly shaving 4 times that year. Which brings me to Bruce. Now, Bruce, I said we met freshman year in Princeton Inn. And then we decided to room, Jeff and Bruce and I decided to room together, and things off. So that is why this story is entitled Hair. And just want to say, I wish I had a beer here because I would toast to our absent friends.
Thank you, Gary.
Two left, apparently. This is Peter Allen. We didn't get a chance to get his bio, but I do remember that, what happened? There it is, okay. I do remember there was a stint maybe at PayPal as a software engineer or something like that. But his piece is entitled, How I Lied to 8 People for a Week in Order to Beat Harvard. His culinary preference, Hoagie Haven, he said there's not even a second or third choice. Here!
So, who here has ever been to the Boathouse? First of all, I kind of feel like the Who trying to call it Hendrix at the Monterey Bob Festival. Because your story is all love. But who here has been to the Boathouse? Who here has been to the Boathouse here at Princeton? Good. That's about half the hands. Most of you had dinner here at our last reunion. That's the first and the only time you've probably been there. Okay. Who's seen the movie Boys in the Boat? You guys are pathetic. All right. Anyway, the Boathouse is fairly unknown to many people here, but we have a lake here that was dug out by Carnegie. That's why it's called Lake Carnegie. And it's 3 miles long in the shape of an L, 1 mile from the boathouse, and then 2 miles straight for a race course that is basically 10 lanes wide, 8 for racing and 2 returning. I spent about 3 hours a day there for my entire 4 years. And in all the time you have on the lake with your mates, you kind of figure out, how many hours of practice are behind every second of race time. There are over 200 hours of practice behind every second of race time. It's absurd. The expression, I lost my shirt, is not a Wall Street expression. It started in 1865 when Yale and Harvard raced each other in the first intercollegiate competition in rowing. And what happened at the end of the race is the losers took their hot, sweaty shirts off after the boats pulled together, and they gave their shirt to the person who beat them. So I lost my shirt is a tradition that has actually passed since the NCAA took over national rowing management. But that's where the expression comes from. So let's fast forward to spring racing. Spring racing is a 2,000-meter race. It lasts somewhere between 6 and 7 minutes. 2 boats racing against each other as fast as they can. And at the end, you have nothing left. And at the end of the season, everybody comes together in something called the Eastern Sprints, where the 8 best teams race 8 lanes together down Lake Carnegie, and the winner gets 7 shirts. So there's a lot at stake. We were undefeated before the race where we met Harvard, the week before the Eastern Sprints. And the week before the Eastern Sprints, Harvard beat us by 3 seats. 3 seats is 1 second. These boats are 60 feet long. And 3 seats, a seat is about 5 feet in length. So 3 seats is 1 second. You get it in your head. I put 200 hours of practice behind that second, and I gave it to those guys. So on the way back, we're about 100 meters away from the finish line. There's not much of a finish line. It's more like a tennis court viewing stand. And there's not much to see for rowing until you get to the very finish. It's like, yeah, I think they started. I think they're rowing. But yeah, they are. No, they stopped. No, they're going back. Okay, there's something going on. And finally, the boats So, let's come down to the race. At the start, we took 3 seats off right away. It was great. We had done our work, and that was the result. We took 3 seats off of it. We had that 1 second. Could we sustain that for another 2,000 meters? And then, at the end of that, I told the crew, I looked over, I'm the only one allowed to look out of the boat. Everyone else has to have their eyes in front of them, following everybody else, because it's a team of 8 people, and you have to be in perfect synchronization. I look over at Harvard, and their 6th man is looking out at me. And I told my crew, and the 6th man is looking right at me, and I've never seen the head whip back into the boat faster. But at that point, we took another 2 seats off of it. And I don't know whether because my crew was psyched or Harvard was, dissed. But anyway, we kept walking down the race course. And by the end of the race, we had open water, which means we were more than 60 feet advantage from them. And so it was a 5-second improvement over 1 week. So this is my confession to the team. I lied to you for an entire week. So I would like to personally apologize. I don't know if anyone's here tonight, but if you are, please stand up and throw something at me. In the bow, so the boat's name was Finn Meisland, who is a very storied coxswain that we had at Princeton. He was handicapped, had polio when he was young, but he was a fantastic coxswain. In the bow was Dave Garman. In the 2 seat was Mel Mummer, a member of our class. In the 3 seat was a fellow who I would just affectionately call Poon, because his tie was way too long for me to pronounce. In the 4 seat was Wade Helm from Louisville. And after that was George Dean. And then in the 6th seat, Steve McKenzie. In the 7th seat, Mike Pinkerton. And in the stroke seat was Ron Cohen. So this is my confession. I have never told this story to anyone in our class.
Peter Allen.
Phil's story is entitled The Power of Dumb Luck. First, we must wish Phil a very happy birthday. You may know Phil as the guy who has designed our most recent class logos. He's a former lawyer, but now a cartoonist whose works have been published in dozens of magazines in the US and the UK, including the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, the Times of London, the New Statesman, and in collaboration, the New Yorker. He also writes humor for many publications. His latest book is Funny Stuff, How Great Cartoonists Make Great Cartoons. Phil's answer to our question was, the Bagel Man. He wrote that he can still hear the refrain, are you hungry for bagels tonight?
Thank you. I'm a freelance cartoonist. That was not always the case. I had a brief 33-year stint as a lawyer, a litigator no less. That was not really how I planned things. Let me take you back to the year 1965. I'm 8 years old. With a number 2 pencil and scrap paper, I am drawing cartoons. Just these single-panel cartoons that I thought were funny, just funny stuff. The kind of things that I see in Mad Magazine and other magazines when magazines were a thing. I sold my first cartoon when I was 15. My high school yearbook refers to me as the resident cartoonist. Now that may lead some people to think a certain career path that I would follow. But I was admitted to Princeton, not to brag or anything. that was actually produced at Wilson College. I wrote another play that was very bad, and unfortunately it was my senior thesis. I still hang my head in shame whenever I hear the name of my advisor, Joyce Carol Oates. So I tried writing short stories, couldn't get them published. I tried writing more plays, couldn't get them produced. I tried being a screenwriter. I actually had an agent. He couldn't get me work. I actually tried freelance journalism, and I had some success with that, and I stuck with that. I could have witnessed firsthand the cratering of that profession. While I was hard at work producing failure, I decided to attend law school at the University of Chicago, whose unofficial motto is, "Where fun goes to die." My advisor was Antonin Scalia. But I got over it. My student debts were astronomical, so I took a job at the largest law firm in San Francisco. My work, let's say, was to serve corporate America. I was not very happy with it. I was working 50 to 60 hours a week, and at this time I was always all the time I was looking for some other way out. Fast forward about 15 years, about 1999, I had written a children's book that I was trying to sell. Why a children's book? Well, they're short. And if you're working your butt off as a lawyer, that's about as much as you can manage. This is as much as I could manage. So what I did was I went to a convention of publishers. Now this is where the hand of dumb luck touched me for the first time. I met a publisher, and he had read my work. He said, "Look, we don't do children's books, but I have an idea for a book, and it's going to be a joke book about turning 50. He already had a title, he had a concept. It was going to be called What You Don't Know About Turning 50. And he said, can you write humor? You write some humor. I've written some humor stuff. He'd seen, he liked it. Well, I'd never written jokes for humor. I'd written humor, so he said, look, we want this to be like right down the middle humor. Nothing too edgy or political or sexy or sophisticated. So I said, okay. He said, write 20 sample jokes. So it had to be in question and answer format. Okay. So I wrote the jokes, and he sent me a book contract. No agent. Okay. Now these are silly books that you would find like at a cashier at a bookstore just to pick up. Well, silly really sells. That book sold very well. 25 years later, it's still selling. So they like, you haven't read it. So the publisher said, well, that was great. Do one on turning 60. Now, by the way, I wrote the one on turning 50. I was like 42. He said, we're doing on turning 60. So I was like, I don't know, whatever I was. A couple years later, that also sold very well. So then it occurred to me, I could write jokes, hundreds of jokes. If I could combine that with drawing, I could become a cartoonist, something I was doing when I was 8 years old. The problem was, I still drew like an 8-year-old. So, I basically had to teach myself how to become a cartoonist, how to draw like a cartoonist. And, it wasn't really easy. At the time, I'm still working full-time as a lawyer, working very long hours, trying to pursue the second career. I'm married, we have a young daughter. we enjoyed it. Well, a lot of the New Yorker cartoonists found out about it, and they liked it. So we kept at it. Dumb luck intervened again. Bob Mankoff, the cartoon editor at the New Yorker, liked the blog. Now, Bob Mankoff, if you don't know him, before he was the cartoon editor, was just a regular cartoonist, and he sold hundreds of cartoons to the New Yorker. You may know this cartoon of the businessman on the phone saying, "No, Thursdays, Al. Hal's never. Does it ever work for you?" That's his. He also started the caption contest in the New Yorker. It's still going on. So anyway, by the way, we interviewed him for this blog. We interviewed other famous cartoonists. I don't know if you know Roz Chast, well-known cartoonist for the New Yorker. She's in every issue, and she's written bestsellers. So we interviewed her and other people. Again, just for fun, really. Anyway, Bob said, "Hey, why don't you guys work for us?" We said, "Sure." He had, and that actually I should explain. He had left the New Yorker at that point, and he was heading up a company called the Cartoon Stock, which is kind of like the Getty Images for cartoons, where you could use at least a cartoon for like a PowerPoint presentation or textbooks, and basically the Cartoon Stock would split it 50-50 with the cartoonists, so it was extra income for cartoonists. He said, "We have a blog. Why don't you write a blog about anything?" Anything related to cartoons, and he would promote it on his blog. Well, I'll tell you, Bob is the best boss I've ever had, because he never changed anything and just seemed to like everything we did. I don't know if he ever read it, but he never complained. So our hobby became a paying gig, and again, just dumb luck. We did this for about 2 years. So one day, Bob says to us, he says, "Hey, you guys should write a book." Now, it never occurred to either of us, certainly not me, to write a book about cartoons. It was just dumb luck that he suggested it. So, we wrote a book about single panel cartoonists like you see in the New Yorker. This time, I got a book agent who got us a publisher, and it's due out on July 16. It's called Funny Stuff: How Great Cartoonists Make Great Cartoons. Bob Mankoff, thank you. Bob Mankoff wrote the foreword. Roz Chast wrote the blurb, calling it delightful, entertaining, and illuminating. I don't know if you know this cartoon feature called Bizarro. Do you know that? Okay, well, I didn't mention this. Before I was doing my own cartoons, I was writing gags for other cartoons and selling them. And I wrote about 25 gags for Bizarro that was done by Dan Ferraro. He's the creator of it. He wrote a blurb saying, "Must read for any cartoon fans." All these things just kind of came together actually now, because even today, I'm talking to the agent, talking to the publicist about the book. It's all coming together. Now keep in mind, this is my third book. None of them were my idea. It was just a matter of dumb luck. Now this is not false modesty. Let me recap. Had I not tried unsuccessfully to try to sell a children's book, had I not met a publisher who wanted me to write a joke book, had that not led to a career in cartooning, which led to a blog, which led to Bob Mankoff, which led to the upcoming book, I'd have very little to say today. The common factor in this chain of events, ladies and gentlemen, dumb luck.
I think we've seen a lot of